Hey, hello there again. This Ben with Studio on the Lake. Hey, here's a failure, and the reason it's a failure is the wood that I used. And I'll give you kind of a concept. And this wood is cedar. It's a chunk of cedar that I used to have outside in the wood pile, and I normally split it up. Well, this one's been sitting out there for about a year, and it was quite wet, but it was a nice little log. It seemed to be the right size, and I wanted to play with this. I was looking at it to do a chainsaw bear, and this was going to be a little practice piece. And it was raining, it was wet, so I grabbed this piece, and it turned out to be just a complete piece of garbage. And I'll take you through that as it goes on. So I didn't do some of the early footage because, like I said, this was a practice piece, and I decided to take it down with regular tools. I did the initial cuts up there, holding it in a vise, and like I said, I didn't film that or in that standing vise, and you can see. And I did it with a sawzall, and the intent of that was kind of the cuts that you'd get with a chainsaw. And of course, a sawzall doesn't have quite. It can do the silhouette, but unlike a chainsaw could come back and do the other portions, kind of like the rubbing and the grinding part. So it was raining outside, and I really wanted to do another chainsaw carving. And then I found out this was just a piece of crap. And being cedar, I don't like to carve cedar unless it's small. I do some fishing decoys, spear fishing decoys and that sort of thing, or if I'm doing some fishing lures, I will do some of those out of a real nice clean western red cedar. But this is just a piece of garbage cedar, a tree that came off the woodlot out there a year or two ago. And it's soft, it's hard, it's annoying to your lungs. You can see it's burning a little bit with that bit. You'll see the smoke on there throughout that. And in a lot of cases, it's just easier to get it doesn't cut clean with a chisel. I should have stopped at this point, but I didn't know that it was going to turn out to be all shaly and whatnot. And then I knew it would crack a little bit, but I didn't think that it would pretty much split itself up into little pieces at the end. So you'll see this at the end, and it turned out I just kind of quit. I might do a little bit more work on it, but a couple pieces broke off and ended up gluing them back on. But this is kind of fun, so you can see a failure. He did start out to be a bear, and I think right after this point, I hadn't done started doing the paws and the stuff, which are pretty simplistic, and he was going to be kind of in a cartoony sort of style. But at this point, I'm thinking bear. And if you look at the top of that, you can see that's the center of it. You can see the rings right on the top of his forehead. That would be the center of this knucklehead of that tree. And this is cutting. That's a Cuts-all or a saber ball, so I can go in any direction. But you'll notice that the smoke and stuff that's coming off of that. So right in here, I knew I had a problem because you can see those little dark spots, and there's a spot on the left there. That was really soft, and it was cracking and shaly, and I knew I was going to have a problem. Even right here on the right side, when I'm starting to get around on the snout, that's cutting right in there, quite a bit different than the other. And being stubborn, I didn't want to give up, so I just kept going. I'm going to end up putting him out on a lake here somewhere. I'll stick him out in the woods so the grandkids can spot him. I'll put him out on a stump or a rock or something and let him gracefully rot away, which shouldn't be too long. The way the wood is acting, I would imagine in 2 years he will be completely gone. Again, the reason that I picked this guy up, or this little stump, was that I wanted to do a smaller one, and it looked like a good representation of one of the bigger logs I have out there. So I will torture you. So I did think he was a bear. That was my intent, and my intent was to make a cuter bear, but not real cute. So that's a great description, right? So not a regular bear, because if you do a real bear, unless he's a grizzly or something, or really clean cut, they look kind of weird. Chainsaw carvers seem to cartoon them out just a little bit, and then other chainsaw carvers cartoon them a lot. They turn them into cute little cuddly bears. I wanted something kind of in the middle. So this guy's pretty straightforward. So I was gonna not talk, but people get annoyed when I don't talk. So Jordy came up with something the other day. That's Jordy Johnson over at Carving Fusion. We collaborate on a lot of stuff. And then we got Just Carve Rob, of people that I follow and stuff. Mark the Maker. They're all down below. Check out Mike over at Sten and Sticks. When you get in the chainsaw side of it, you can't go wrong. Taking a look at Ryan Cook's stuff. And then Ryan Cook introduced a guy that works with him quite a bit, and he calls him Uncle Kevin, not his uncle, but you should go check out his channel. They're down below. It kind of supports everybody and keeps everybody out of trouble. So I'm just going to continue to work along on this guy in the background, but Jordy talks about art and selling your pieces. So here's what I've learned over the years. You get into the discussion of how do you price it. Well, you can't price a lot of this stuff on an hourly wage. So if first of all, you'd have to agree on what a reasonable hourly wage for your time is. And I'm just going to take a stab at it, and you guys can leave me comments and that sort of thing. And I would say that a reasonable wage would be $20, $25 an hour. I will tell you, I make substantially more than that flying an EMS helicopter, and a lot more than that, and it's in 12-hour stitches. So when I add that together, that's a pretty good paycheck. And I do that 7 days on, 7 days off, so 7 days of 12 hours, and then I get a standard, like the rest of the world, a 2-week paycheck. Now, I know that's a little exorbitant, perhaps on the higher side, and you couldn't sit here and do this for 12 hours. You'd lose your mind. I carve typically for 3 to 4 hours on the days that I'm home. I normally do it in the morning. Here's a note. Here's a couple of those eye gouges that I got, and I really still don't like them. I use them on an owl at the end of this, and they come in graduated sizes. But I'd still almost rather carve these in by hand. But jury's still out on that. So, and you can see that it does not like it in that wet cedar. I'm really pushing hard, and I'm trying to get it to do a little bit of burn. But at this point, I can kind of see where the wife, when I brought it inside, I had the head done. I don't know, probably a little bit more than this. And she said, "Oh, cute raccoon." And then my daughter came over from next door with grandson, and she said, "Oh, nice raccoon." And I was like, "Man, that's a bear." I didn't say anything, of course, and then I started staring at it, and I guess it is a raccoon. So the next time I brought him out, I did a little bit more working on his nose and pointed his nose. Isn't that interesting? That stuff is burning in the background like that. Anyway, so we're talking about an hourly wage, which would be reasonable, you would think, for an artist. So just take a normal piece of mine. I'll have 2 to 4 hours in the smaller pieces, typically maybe 6 hours. In some of the nicer pieces, I'll have 20 hours, 30 hours. And I don't really have anything around anymore. And I've gotten quicker. Therefore, I don't have anything that's going in the 40, 50, 100, 200 hour range on that. So if you think about it, 10 hours at $20 an hour, you do the math. So that doesn't seem unreasonable. But if I work on a small bird, and let's say the small birds take me 3 hours, that says I've got $60 of my time at $20 an hour. All right, and I think that's probably on the low side, personally. But it gives you an idea. So then let's say you've got $5 worth of wood in that. So now you're at $65. Now, I don't know. That doesn't give you any wiggle room for, as you can see, if you were trying to do this for a business, you'd have shop upkeep, you'd have electricity, you'd have advertising, you'd have all the rest of that. And you can see out of an 8-hour day, 3 hours were made to taken to get that $65 piece. Well, then you kind of get the idea where this is going. So that's why artists are starving. Until they get famous, they really can't get good money for what you are. I mean, if you look at Ryan Cook's stuff and a lot of the chainsaw guys, they'll say, hey, how to carve a $50 sign or a $75 bear, $75 1 hour bear. Well, the reason they're doing that is they know that their bigger sculptures and the stuff that they're doing, they want to get $800, $2,000, $3,000 for them, and they're definitely worth it, considering the time that they put in and the artistic part of it. But most people don't have $2,000 that they're willing to spend and call you up and have a truck bring this huge log sculpture over. So their bread and butter is these smaller ones like this guy here, maybe a little bit bigger. And they try to do it fast. So they'll do a $75 bear in 15 minutes or 30 minutes. Now, granted, when they're filming fast like that, they are they're just trying to get a production piece out. If a lot of you probably watching have soldier stuff or might have a shop of some other. See, isn't that guy looking kind of raccoony now, especially once I put his mouth in? And you can tell that I knew he was a raccoon at this point, because I had thinned out his nose a little bit, and I did what the women told me. They said, raccoon. And changed my mind from, oh, no, he's a bear. Oh, okay, he's a raccoon. But you kind of get the concept. So how do you price your stuff? You price it according, in my opinion, to what it's worth to you. All right? If you're going to carve a lot, and I do a lot of painting also in the wintertime, watercolor and oil. If you're not selling it and you're doing production, at some point you need to get rid of it. Otherwise, you become your house becomes filled with wood carvings and paintings that are stacked around and that sort of thing. So, there's only three ways to do that. 1, you give them away. 2, you sell them. 3, you throw them away and you burn them. And I'm a big fan of not destroying art. Nothing annoys me more than to see the Taliban or some group in the Middle East, like when they destroyed the couple 1,000-year-old Buddhist statues that were up on the rock walls, or to see religious knuckleheads tearing down things, or wrecking statues or art or that kind of stuff. That just annoys the shit out of me. Kids going through a national park and tearing down a natural rock formation because they think it'd be funny to tip it over. I'm not a big destruction fan. Just because you don't like it doesn't mean that it needs to be destroyed. Someone else likes it or other people like it. So art wasn't necessarily created for you. Other people created it because they like the looks of it. You get where I'm going. I'll get off the soapbox here. Anywho, so one of the fun things about art is, if you think back, they kind of got the concept right when you were in grade school. In the old days, you made an ashtray. I think nowadays, if you brought an ashtray home, your parents would lose their mind because the teacher had you make an ashtray and it was associated with smoking. That's part of being politically correct. But you got to think of something that you can build to introduce kids to art. And at that time, it was clay and firing clay, and then they weren't that pretty. Some of them were quite artistic or interesting in a different sort of way. Along the same lines, those of you that are as old as I am remember gluing macaroni to a piece of paper or a piece of cardboard and then macaroni art and then painting it. Well, that was the art or the teacher's way of turning you on to art. And it was fun. You got to admit, it was fun to do. So anyway, off the soapbox, as you're back to watching this guy, I did a lot of work with chisels because the dust was nasty. And it didn't necessarily work out pretty good with the chisels. But I really kind of like the shape of where this guy's going out. Now watch here. This is the point where I give up on this thing. It's cutting bad. Just out of the blue, this piece of shale, I call it shale because it's like wood breaking off, and went back in there nice. But I had no inclination that was going to break off, and lots of other pieces. Now you can see it is cedar, and those of you that know cedar know that the rings will break in that area. Well, I glued him back. I glued his foot back on, and let him set for. This is where I parked him. But then a week or two later, I came back and he'd set out in the stuga and he'd dried a little bit, and I'll show you him at the end. So there's a failure. I gave up on that. I did a little bit more on the smoothing, but here's some interim. Here's an owl that I'm doing. And if you listen to the last story, I owe owls to one of my nephew's significant others. So I'm working up a couple of owls. I talked about a gnome door. Here's a gnome door, and I'll give you more information on that. That's now installed. My wife chose not to paint it, to leave it this way. She was going to paint it. It's installed over a piece of baseboard in the bathroom beside a toilet in the cabin or the main house. When we installed, I wired a vent, and due to some weird framing, and I'll get into that when I do the filming on this thing, the cut ended up being about 4 or 5 inches off the floor, where I had to fish the wire down into the basement to get power. And so it needed something to cover it. Well, rather than put a 4 or 5 inch new piece of baseboard trim in there, I went ahead and made a gnome door. And so now when you're sitting on the toilet and you look down to your left, about 3 feet away is this gnome door sitting on the bottom there. So that's stuff that's in the background going on. So here he is 2 weeks probably after I gave up on him, and look at the cracks in that guy. I mean, he is cute, and I don't want to throw it in the fire, but it's a pain in the butt to carve on, and it's cracking. I've got a representation of what he looks like, so I think I'll throw some spar varnish or something on him. You can see that right hand side there where I'm playing with. That's all just punky, and that's where he wants to split. And this side is not so bad, but you saw I just played with that. There's the bottom of it, and each of those rings that you can see, he wants to split in a circular manner. Now check this side out. There's the foot I glued back on, lower right hand corner, but up here, look at that split in the side of his head. And this stuff is nice and dry now. I can stick the whole knife blade down in there, probably an inch deep. But like I said, I'm going to save him. I'm going to keep him. I'm going to try to do a little bit more work on him, then I'll stick him out in the woods. I don't want to throw him away. So here's a failure, and I thought it'd be kind of fun for you to see that. So there he is, the bear that turned into a raccoon. Like, subscribe, and comment, and thanks a lot. This has been Ben with Studio on the Lake.